Alright, hello friends. I've got an ambitious one today, alright? So it's actually one that's a little above my pay grade. Been a little intimidated to put it out there, but I just got done working out and endorphins are flowing. I'm feeling good, I'm feeling strong, so I'm coming out with it. So, as befitting, channel titled, named Scavenger, this idea that I have is really kind of combined from three ideas that I scavenged from three different books. One of them being Chaos Protocols by Gordon White, the other being The Trickster and the Paranormal by George Hansen, and the other being Egregores by Mark Stavish. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm going to condense this as much as possible. It is a hypothesis, a idea put forward to explain paranormal phenomenon of all kinds. Like I said, it's ambitious. Throwing it out there as brain candy, man. You guys disagree? Got something to add to it? Something to contradict? Throw it in the comment box. I got no problem with it. Actually would love it. But okay, here's the deal. We're going to start out with number one, the notion put forward in Chaos Protocols, which I believe is just taken from, just chaos theory in general, but I don't know about that. The idea is essentially this, that reality, and for this thought experiment, let's just keep it to Earth. It'll be easier to visualize, and as I go, you'll see why the visualization aspect is important. So, let's say reality, which we will embody simply as Earth, is not a field of absolutes. It is instead a field of probabilities, right? Meaning that it's like the whole Schrodinger's cat thing, the interaction between consciousness and external reality, and the consciousness is constantly interplaying with the outcomes of reality. And so if you picture Earth, rather than picturing it as absolutes, you picture it as a field of probabilities. Now within those, certain things would be, so highly probable that they would almost be certainties. Like an example would be that a rock today will be a rock tomorrow. Certain other things, though, the probabilities would be a little like, will you get a raise at work, right? Something like that. You're dealing more with unpredictable probabilities, uncertainties. Right? Okay, so we picture this. We got this ball of, I gotta do something with my light, man. It really bugs me. Looks like I have a double chin. I do not have a double chin. But anyway, so you got this ball of probabilities. Okay, now we're going to go to the concept put forward by Mark Stavish and Egregores. And that concept is that sometimes when a group of people, multiple individuals, share a certain idea, that shared consciousness becomes its own egregore, which is kind of like it becomes its own consciousness, which can act independently of the people involved. And, it's kind of a concept that works, and I hope I'm getting this right? I'm reading these books, getting this stuff in my mind, trying to sort it out. But, and so with that idea, like, it may be an easier way to understand it. You'll hear other people talk about, like, people who aren't into the, metaphysics or paranormal or anything, will just simply talk about, like, the infectiousness of ideas, or becoming ideologically possessed, is a way that Jordan Peterson likes to say it, which is basically, people get so caught up in an idea. I mean, you're seeing it happen today. I'm sure you all have somebody in your life that was formerly and otherwise a rational, self-controlled person who has become politically obsessed with some kind of political ideology. That's happening right now on a very big level with a lot of different people. Well, that's kind of a way to look at it. But for this experiment, this is how I'm thinking about it. Looking at this field of probabilities from up high, right? You got this ball of uncertainty. Now within it, you would have these combined consciousnesses of various groups that form these egregores. And for this experiment, we're going to visualize them as bubbles, right? So a way to think about it is like, say, New York City. The city itself has a certain level of an egregore. And important thing to remember here, or important thing to keep in mind, is that saying that something has formed an egregore doesn't mean that every person is beholden to one egregore. I mean, we're kind of like all influenced by multiple egregores, although there can be a time when a certain egregore becomes so overwhelming and so powerful, like in a religious cult or something, that it blocks out the influence of all the other egregores around you. But in a normal state, like you could picture it, there'd be like the New York City egregore, and then within that egregore would be, say, a borough's egregore, and then within that would be different churches have their own egregores, and then even within the churches you'd have maybe different like groupings of people who kind of form their own little egregores, right? So you have egregores within egregores influencing each other, except in those situations where somebody gets so obsessed, or where one egregore becomes so overpowering that it blocks out all the other egregores, right? But generally, we're looking down, you picture it, you got the ball, Earth, ball of probabilities, certain fields, these egregores of formed consciousness around them. Now, the reason this idea actually popped into my head, though, was because of The Trickster and the Paranormal by George Hansen, which is an amazing book. George Hansen spent his whole life studying the paranormal from a scientific perspective, and it's a great book. Anybody who has seen the Hellier series, the book features pretty prominently in that series. And there was a little observation in the book that just jumped out at my mind, because Hansen observed, he was talking about tribal cultures, and how in certain cultures, before people enter these kind of like, these rites of like passage, like most tribal cultures they'll have a time. It's usually with men, but I think sometimes with women. I'm not really sure. But where the member of the tribe has to undergo some kind of test or go through some kind of ritual procedure, and then they enter like the next level where they are an adult and they are truly part of the tribe. And he was saying that in a lot of these ritual situations, they will have the tribe member has to go out into the wilderness, and the tribe will totally ignore this person, because sometimes the person will have to come in to steal food from the tribe or something. And when they do, the tribe acts like he's literally not, or he or she literally isn't there, like they don't exist, right? And they do that all because it's like the person has been cut off from the tribe, and it's like you have to go into the wilderness, you have to undergo these things, then go through this ritual procedure, and then when you come back, you will be absorbed back into the tribe, or back into the egregore, right? If we look at it as a tribal egregore, a group egregore, then, you come back, you go through this process, and then we'll welcome you back into the egregore, this bubble of consciousness that we call our tribe or our country or whatever. Well, we're speaking now about tribes specifically. Okay, so that's what I was reading, and I read that part, and I was like, that's interesting. It's just a small part in the book. But I was like, that's really interesting, because what it got me thinking about, right? This is what set off this whole train of associations that led me to what I am proposing today. Okay. Say that consciousness works the way many physicists have said it does, and in the way just a lot of people in various traditions, various ideas say it does, which is where our consciousness interacts directly with the probabilities of the probable outcomes of reality. In a group, consciousness can mold the probabilities even more. So like if you have one person who has strong belief in something, strong faith in something, they can alter, or like, Gordon White is, he's into chaos magic, and so his whole thing is, it's not just his whole thing, but the idea is that by using this magic, you narrow the probabilities of certain outcomes, and you can hone them into outcomes that are what you want, So like if you want that promotion at work, you go through this process of this, chaos magic process, and you increase this probabilities of certain outcomes, right? But what if, and I believe this has been validated by like Dean Radin, I believe, Dean Radin, with some of his random number generation experiments, that mass consciousness, group consciousness, alters reality on an even greater scale. And that would just make sense, right? Like if you have 100 people that believe in something, presuming that our consciousness actually does interact with reality in this way, if that is true, then we could presume that 100 people with a joined belief and joint outcome would alter reality even more, right? And so we have the spinning ball of probabilities, uncertainties. And within that, we have these egregores, which, viewed from up top, we could picture them as these bubbles of consciousness. And these bubbles of joined consciousness for this thought experiment, what if the bubbles of joined consciousness, which form things called egregores, according to Mark Stavish's book, or as suggested by Mark Stavish's book, what if these joined consciousnesses actually work together to narrow the probability of certain outcomes, meaning that they kind of become bubbles of reality in themselves? By which I mean, like, if everybody shares a certain belief, they raise the likelihood of that belief actually manifesting in reality, right? So instead of just thinking of it as bubbles of, think of it as these bubbles of consciousness in this shared consciousness actually alters the reality for everybody within that bubble, right? If that is true, and again, say along for this thought experiment, if that is true, then in a city, right, that would be why we could say we have such predictable outcomes for things. As opposed to when people go out into the wilderness, that's where we have the most paranormal encounters. And just the most, strange supernatural encounters. Like, people usually are away from cities, away from towns, and they're often either by themselves or just with one or two people. And, and so what if the reason why people who are alone or by themselves encounter what we call the paranormal, the supernatural, so much more, what if it's simply because they are outside of the field, I want to say morphic field for Rupert Sheldrake, but I think that's abusing his concept. But just these fields, these bubbles of reality-focusing consciousness. What if people, when they go outside of those, they're into more of the native, natural reality of wildly unpredictable outcomes? And that is why, when people are in those situations, that is why they encounter the paranormal so much, because that is actually the native state of reality. That is the native state when it is not honed and formed by group consciousness, by national consciousness, by city consciousness, by religious, whatever it is, whatever any group's egregore is, right? When we go outside of that, we are subjected to the wild probabilities of reality as reality is when it is not honed by joined human consciousness. I'm hoping I explained that well. I think I did, but if not, let me know, and I will try to do better. Maybe I should sit down and write it down. But I don't know. It's an interesting thought experiment, and it seems to maybe explain some things, but I don't know. I'm throwing it out there as a thought experiment more than anything else to see what anybody thinks. It's definitely intriguing brain candy, I think. I hope. Let me know if it's not. Let me know it's, dude, this sucks. This is stupid. Let me know. I think it's kind of cool, though. That's about it, man. That's my idea for how the paranormal functions. And the supernatural, whatever we want to call it. So, and maybe, I guess, really, if it was true, which admits it's probably not true, but if it was true, let's, really, it could be like an explanation for reality itself in a way. But anyway, I don't know. Just a thought I've been bouncing around, something I thought was interesting, and I wanted to share in the spirit of delicious brain candy. Be curious what anybody thinks. All right, peace out.